Viral photos online claim to show miserable meals for Donald Trump's troops in the Middle East, and it's triggering concern from family members who are concerned their loved ones are going hungry. Tell us all about this.
That's right, Mark. As the US maintains its blockade of vessels heading to and from Iranian ports in the Strait of Hormuz, photos of meager meals reportedly served aboard US naval vessels are going viral across social media. Now, this is one of the images circulating, reportedly taken on board the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln. Shows a nearly empty food tray, a small handful of boiled carrots, a dried out meat patty, and what can only really be described as a slab of grey, unidentifiable processed meat.
It's Ken Harbaugh with the MeidasTouch Network. There is a reason I had to pull this clip from an English-language news service based in France. It's because the U.S. media is barely covering the story. We already know how badly the Pentagon, under Pete Hegseth's leadership, has failed to prepare for the war against Iran. The Navy didn't have its minesweepers in the Gulf. We failed to harden our installations against missile and drone attacks. And most of all, we had no plan for keeping the Strait of Hormuz open. But we also apparently failed in the most basic task of provisioning our deployed forces. That means providing them with the absolute basics like food and hygiene products.
Now, as we can see here, here's a statement from one father who only wanted to be referred to as Dan. He said that according to his daughter on board the USS Tripoli, members were rationing their food supplies on the ship. Fresh produce was nowhere to be found. She told him that hygiene products were running low as well on the ship. He also said that as a former veteran himself, he said, "We have the strongest military in the world. You shouldn't be running out of food, and you shouldn't not be able to get mail on the ship."
The Pentagon, of course, denies all of this. Pete Hegseth called it fake news. But one of the things that happens when a government lies as habitually as this one does is that people no longer take that government at its word. And the more that Pete Hegseth tries to control the flow of information, the more suspicious and angry people in the military become. The first ships deployed to support the war against Iran are starting to come home, and the information blackout that Hegseth has tried to impose is about to collapse. Sailors and their family members are going to talk, and soon enough, the entire country will know just how badly our military has been led into a war that never should have happened in the first place. I talked with Kris Goldsmith about this. He's a combat vet himself and the founder of Veterans Fighting Fascism. Here's our conversation. Kris, thanks for joining us. You've been following this story of U.S. Navy sailors downrange, mostly in Fifth Fleet in the Arabian Gulf and the surrounding AOR, literally going hungry. I mean, look, I ate bad food when I was deployed in the Navy, but I never lost. In fact, I usually gained weight on a deployment. We're hearing stories of sailors losing 30 pounds because of the food they're being asked to eat while burning thousands of calories a day. You know, it's not like they're sitting around. Life at sea is hard.
Yeah, these stories have been coming out since at least last month when USA Today published this kind of bombshell piece about how Hegseth had not made sure that supply lines would remain open during the war with Iran. There have been, for weeks, if not months, packages that have been just stuck in limbo, food rotting in warehouses, who knows where, maybe in the desert, maybe in Germany. So families who are hearing from, their internet-connected sailors and Marines who are on the USS Abraham Lincoln and other ships, they're trying to help, but Hegseth has not facilitated the military logistics necessary to actually feed the troops. I am someone who, when I was in basic training, I was a teeny tiny guy, and they made sure that I got extra rations because they wanted to make sure that I was ready to fight a war. When I deployed to Iraq, I even if I was eating MREs, I got more calories than I needed so that I could bulk up. The sailor that is reported on in Jared Zizzer's Substack piece, he was 168 pounds and 6 foot tall. And then he lost over 30 pounds. So he's 6 foot tall and 128 pounds. That is skeletal. And this is not, onesies and twosies. The USA Today story came out last month in between this thing that broke over the weekend and then Newsweek came out with even more sailors who've lost tens of pounds. And, food isn't just important for the mission, it's also important for motivation. We are going to be in a re-enlistment crisis because of the way that Pete Hegseth has failed to manage this war of choice, the illegal incursion into Iran.
We haven't begun to hear and see the stories that are going to come out of this war like a flood, like a landslide. Once these sailors get home, the Ford is on its way back to the States now. If you wonder what the downside or one of the downsides of banning the Pentagon press corps from the building is, it's that these stories get pent up. It's that there aren't the truth seekers holding the Pentagon accountable, which isn't just good for democracy and the American people. It's good for the Pentagon. I mean, that is an insight that I don't think Hegseth will ever take to heart. We talked to Fred Wellman, who was Petraeus's spokesperson. He was the 101st Airborne's spokesperson in Iraq, who talked about the advantages of having media that did its job. The advantages to the military, as annoying as it was for him trying to answer all of their annoying questions, it made the Army better. I don't know if in your role as a ground pounder, you ever felt this, but I got to believe you're seeing it now, at least what happens when you don't have a fourth estate that is empowered to do its job.
Yeah, it is amazingly short-sighted that Hegseth and Trump think that they can kind of like threaten their way into making these kinds of stories go away. But there are 50,000 troops who are deployed to the Middle East in support of the whatever, name they're giving the Iran conflict right now. That's 50,000 people who are seeing, witnessing, taking photos and taking videos on their personal phones on a daily basis of what reality is over there. And while, it's important to maintain, operational security, discipline, and that kind of thing, it is also important to blow the whistle when the Secretary of Defense is lying to Congress and saying that all of the sailors are being well fed, they're eating gourmet food every meal. I mean, that's the way that Pete Hegseth responded to the original USA Today photo. He had the Pentagon posting photos of like gourmet food, literal piles of it. And at this point, I don't know who he expects to trust him, because the first thing that I saw was, it's either an old photo or that's AI. And just because there's one time with one photo of a lot of food, that doesn't mean that 3 meals a day or 4 meals, because there's always night shifts. It doesn't mean that everybody's eating the calories that they need. And that is, that can have lasting effects on the body. Starvation is a serious thing. And for someone who is 6 foot tall to drop down to 128 pounds from 160 is already really skinny for 6 foot tall. That is, I would think, pretty catastrophic weight loss that could potentially have long-term impacts.
Delete Me makes it easy, quick, and safe to remove your personal data online at a time when surveillance and data breaches are common enough to make everyone vulnerable. I've got an active online presence between the show, social media, and years of public work on veterans issues and national security. My name is out there a lot, and I've seen what happens when that kind of exposure goes wrong. Doxing, harassment, identity theft. It's not hypothetical for people in this space. Delete Me does all the hard work of wiping your personal information from data broker websites. You sign up, you tell them exactly what you want removed, and their experts take it from there. They send you regular personalized privacy reports showing what info they found, where they found it, and what they removed. And it's not a one-time sweep. They're constantly monitoring and removing the personal information you don't want on the internet. The New York Times Wirecutter has named Delete Me their top pick for data removal services. Take control of your data and keep your private life private by signing up for Delete Me. Now at a special discount for our listeners, get 20% off your Delete Me plan when you go to joindeleteme.com/Ken and use promo code Ken at checkout. The The only way to get 20% off is to go to joindeleteme.com/Ken and enter code Ken at checkout. That's joindeleteme.com/Ken, code Ken. Hey everyone, it's Ken. Super quick break to remind you that I've got a Substack page. Please consider subscribing for exclusive content and bi-weekly Substack lives. And for the next month, every paid subscription goes towards my upcoming reporting trip to Ukraine. Thanks for the support. The link is below. Slava Ukraine. I'm going to connect a couple dots here, because at the same time that Hegseth is lying about the treatment of sailors and I would imagine airmen and soldiers and Marines downrange, at the same time that he is trying to cover up the catastrophic incompetence that led to the lack of preparation for a prolonged conflict that's going to require long logistics trains, he is threatening Kelly in a court case in which the government argued that the deal you sign when you join the military and when you take that pension upon leaving is that you keep your mouth shut. If things go bad, if you have a gripe or critique of the administration, you don't get to make it unless you're willing to surrender your pension. And nowhere in that argument, nowhere in that courtroom was a distinction made between someone like Senator Kelly, who has a massive platform and whose critiques of the administration can have damaging effects on that administration and its, I guess, ability to prosecute a war, or say a former 4-star or 3-star and their ability to speak out in a political way against an administration. Nowhere was the distinction made between individuals like that and the positions of power and influence they hold, and a sergeant or a seaman, recruit, or a senior chief who's dropped 30 pounds on deployment and wants to blow the whistle on how his shipmates are starving. Theoretically, the argument that the government made could be used to deny VA benefits, healthcare, home loans to anyone who dared criticize the administration even after they got out of the military.
The only reason that they're making this argument is because they know that Democrats would never look to strip MAGA veterans of their benefits. Now, there was talk about stripping VA benefits from the insurrectionists who attacked the Capitol on January 6th. But there's a pretty serious difference between using your platform to speak and trying to kill cops with their own shields and batons, right?
Huge difference.
That there is a really, really big gap here. And the Trump regime is trying to normalize this. This is what fascists do, right? They make it so that you cannot criticize the boss. That is, a fascist government or a fascist movement operates like the mafia. It has what is effectively a king, and if you hurt that king's feelings, then that justifies anything that could possibly happen to you. And the fact that they are going after not just a retired sailor, but an astronaut who's a senator, it just makes me, it's more evidence that everyone in the Trump administration are just incredibly short-sighted.
Yes.
Because, the left doesn't like the retribution and revenge kind of thing. But at the same time, people can only take so much.
Yeah.
And if they're, if they continue abusing power, we're going to have to make sure that through legislation, regulation, through changes in the culture, that they are never able to do this kind of thing again in the future.
That was an excerpt of my conversation with Kris Goldsmith. For the full interview, check out my Substack. The link's below. Thanks.
Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber to our Substack at MeidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, ad-free episodes of our podcast, and more exclusive content only available at MeidasPlus.com.